bullet train system in the U.S. would be beneficial to the country. Most of the rest of the world has a bullet train system, and it's a really efficient way of travel for them. Japan's had one since 1964. They were the first ones to have them, so we're half a century behind in that aspect. And imagine living in a country where you still get around by steam engine train or get around by horse and carriage while the rest of the world is driving cars. We're supposed to be the richest and most powerful and advanced country in the world. Yeah, we're so far behind in that aspect. My next point is bullet trains are more environmentally friendly than airplanes. Airplanes pollute the air with lots of jet fuel, and while most people would still probably take planes if they're going across the country. For shorter flights, like from LA to San Francisco or LA to Phoenix or something like that, most people could take the bullet trains instead of flying, and just that alone would dramatically reduce the amount of pollution in the air, and that would be good for us and the environment long term. Also, bullet trains are probably the safest way to travel. In the 50 years that they've been operating, Japan has never had a fatal bullet train crash. According to the website for the Central Japan Railway Company, they've only had a couple of train derailments in the past that were caused by earthquakes, and neither of those were fatal, and there were no deaths or injuries either. There have only been a few deaths because of people jumping into the tracks when the train was coming and committing suicide, or someone getting a body part or one of their luggage stuck in the door when the train started moving. But they have security guards at every entrance at the platform to make sure that doesn't happen. And they also have an earthquake detection system that can stop the train quickly in the event of an earthquake. And also, bullet trains are more comfortable for passengers than airplanes. I'm sure you've all flown in coach on airplanes before. So you know what that's like. It's not the most comfortable way to travel. You're sort of packed in like a sardine. There's not a whole lot of leg room or anything. You got people around you coughing, sneezing, stuff, good germs. With bullet trains, the trains are bigger and the seats are bigger, and there's more room to stretch your legs and move around. So, summarize, most of the rest of the world has a bullet train system. They're more environmentally friendly than airplanes, which will benefit us in the long term and could help fight global warming and all that. Safest way to travel. Japan's bullet train system has pretty much a perfect safety record, and they're more comfortable than planes. So, yeah, that's it.
Oh, you're so nice. You have like a lot of evidence that says it was.
So like,
Just explain.
once he's like a quarter mile away.
You can write a lot if you agree.
So,
You have to.
oh, fuck, yeah, but it's way back. But,
Yeah, like you said, all about
he's
like
like
so
showing our cattle,
just talk about how all
like,
lives like
kill
are
people, like, make sure to kill people. Like, when he sees the guys, they don't even use the brakes until it's right there, because they, either way, they're good. It's like, once they move, it's gonna be.
Wednesday,
So we should do it.
Thursday. Okay, I'm getting started. Thank you. The subject is identified adequately. Your purpose statement is clearly stated. There's some factual data on the history of bullet trains that you're using to set up the issue, and that's fine. But there's no layout of what the secondary structure is going to be. Now, in the body of the speech, I can kind of pick up a few points that maybe make up the main structure of the speech. And at the end of the speech, it does rescue you a little bit by giving it some structure, because I can tell that what the points were that you thought were building to this particular conclusion. So although I thought it was a little bit weak at the beginning, it did seem to be a little clearer at the end how these ideas were developing. The internal signposting could be clearer. I think some numerical signposts are called for here. On a couple of the points, there's some issues with evidence. The issue of pollution, for instance, is raised on that first point, and I didn't hear any information about pollution from airplanes, what the kind of pollution is, how substantial it is. It largely is asserted that there's pollution that's caused by airplanes operating in the sky. Now, I have no doubt that there are exhaust fumes, but how problematic that is, that those exhaust fumes are out there at 30,000 feet, and how much of them there is, I don't know. And how am I supposed to contrast that to bullet trains? It sounds to me like you were suggesting that bullet trains are pollution free, but I don't get any data on how they are propelled, what the power sources are, what the level of pollution is, how frequently they would have to run in order to match the transportation that's provided by airplanes if they were going to be replacing airplanes, and therefore decreasing the amount of pollution that's available. And I would need that information in order to make the comparison that you're talking about here. The comfort issue that you talk about is really a value claim that's going on, and if we're going to talk about comfort, I don't imagine that any train is going to be as comfortable as my automobile is going to be, and so if that's the standard that you want to make a comparison on, I think you're inviting some problems there. I think that you're better off focusing on either economic issues that would be enhanced by access to a bullet train, or like you started, the environmental issues that could go along with it. It really sounds like there's some bullet train envy. Well, Japan's had it for 50 plus years, and I'm trying to figure out, okay, so what has been better about living in Japan for the last 50 years than has been better living here for the last 50 years? And the only thing that I get is that, like I said, the atmosphere is apparently less polluted. Do they have fewer planes in Japan as a consequence of the bullet trains? I don't know. I didn't get any data on that kind of thing, how frequently the passengers use bullet trains as opposed to airplane travel, which is the first comparison that you're making. And I ought to be getting some of that. It's a very generic introduction to the goal of having a bullet train for U.S. transportation needs. You mentioned the comparison, for instance, moving to northern Southern California, so there ought to be a discussion of the high-speed train project that is being utilized in, that we are building currently, or that we're supposed to be building currently. If you want to use that as a model to make your argument, there's a lot of data that talks about what its economic impact would be, what the potential environmental issues are, and it just seems like you're missing an opportunity to develop some more substantive proof on that point that is specifically relevant to the culture and the economy that you're talking about here, and that's a missed opportunity that's based primarily on research that's going on there. Delivery issues, Ryan, I suspect you're a low-key kind of guy most of the time, and so when you're talking to us in that low-key manner, that's perfectly acceptable. That's who you are. I don't think that you need to pretend to be somebody else, but I do think that you need to take and make yourself, the strongest elements of yourself in presenting your speech. And that would include looking at us more frequently, maybe pausing in a couple of places. And your reading needs to be a little more dynamic. I'm not saying that you have to raise your voice or get a sarcastic tone in there when you're disparaging. Imagine if we were still dependent on steam trains to get around someplace. I don't think you need to have to do that, but I do think sometimes that you need to emphasize a point a little bit more. You don't have to become flamboyant in the presentation, but you have to be a little bit more engaged. You sound a little disengaged, and if an audience is going to listen to people, they're not going to listen to people when they're disengaged. They've got to seem like they care about the issue and are really, it's something important. And so you're going to have to work a little bit on those things, okay? All right, thank you.